I want to sum up by saying that I don't think the real issue is a choice between the word Democratic or the word Republican. We have a Republican form of government. And in fact, famously, when Ben Franklin was asked, what kind of government have you given us? He said, a republic, if you can keep it. And what Franklin meant is that we have a system of government that is accountable to and for, on behalf of the people. Lincoln spoke later about a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. And Lincoln, too, was placing himself very much in that founding tradition. Now, that tradition does have democratic elements, and I think it's a mistake for us as Republicans, as conservatives, to deny that our structure is democratic in many ways. It's just not democratic in all ways. So it's kind of helpful to spell out what are the democratic and what are the undemocratic elements of our system of government. So here are some democratic elements. We have a president who is, or should be, elected by the people. The people vote directly for the president, so that is clearly a democratic part of our system. Senators are voted for by the people. Representatives of the House are voted for by the people. So these are all the elected figures in government, and it applies not only to the legislature, but also to the executive branch. And of course, we notice that the exact same structure is mirrored at the state level, right? The elected chief official of a state is the governor, elected by the people. Then you have the state representatives and the state senators, elected by who? By the people also. Now, let's turn to the undemocratic elements of our system of government. We have a Supreme Court, unelected. And the job of the Supreme Court is to protect the rights of the people, individual rights, against the legislature. That's why we read the Bill of Rights. Congress shall make no law. Congress can't do this. Congress can't do that. So limitations on government and on the majority are the job of the courts to protect. And then there's a Constitution. The Constitution, too, is undemocratic in the sense that nobody votes on it. We inherit it. It comes from a previous generation. You can almost say that the Constitution is the democracy of the dead. And by that I mean it's almost like you take voters from the beginning of society to now and give everybody a vote. And if you give everybody a vote, the living and the dead, obviously the dead would outnumber the living. And the Constitution is a kind of enduring pact through the ages that can only be changed, as I said, in a very difficult way. The Senate is undemocratic in a sense, and by that I mean is that the Senate operates on a long leash. While somebody who's in the House of Representatives, well, they got to run for election every 2 years, so you don't like him, you kick him out, bring another guy in, 2 years later, kick that guy out. Senate has a longer duration, 6 years. And also the Senate is undemocratic in the sense that we have equal weight, equal voting power for senators from large and small states. So you have a state like Rhode Island, a very small state, but it's got 2 senators, the same as California, which is a huge state. So this may appear at the first glance to be some kind of archaic, and sometimes liberals portray it as archaic. They'll say things like, well, why should the citizens of California have less power through the Senate than citizens of, say, Montana, Wyoming, or Rhode Island? Well, for the founders originally, it was a matter of large states and small states and sort of making sure that the large states couldn't run roughshod over the small states. But I would argue today the same rationale applies, but in a slightly modified way. It's not so much today a difference between the large states and the small states, but it's rather a difference between the big cities and the rural areas. So if we had an America that was solely driven by population, the big cities ultimately would rule the entire country. They would have complete sway over the lives of tens of millions of people who would, in a sense, be effectively disenfranchised. Effectively disenfranchised because their voice, although it would count, wouldn't really matter in the end. They would be consistently outvoted. I think the reason that conservatives don't like the word democratic is because they see the Democrats trying to undo a lot of the features of our system that are intended to curtail mob rule or curtail the excesses of the majority. So you hear, for example, leftists say, we don't need a Senate. The Senate should be representative the same as the House. Oh, we don't need the filibuster. We don't want a minority blocking things like that. Or even the Supreme Court, efforts to pack the court. The Supreme Court must reflect the will of the people. The Supreme Court must look like America. All of these are ways of the left targeting, if you will, the unrepresentative aspects of our government and trying to undo them as though somehow we need to go to some sort of unadulterated, pure democracy in which the majority has absolute rights over the minority. The majority can do, as in England, through Parliament, just pretty much whatever it wants. That's not our system. It's never been our system. Our system has been to protect majority rule, but in the context of minority rights and individual rights. And that is the American exceptionalism that I think has become a magnet and a model for the world. That's why we insist that we are a republic and not a democracy, not because we deny the democratic aspects of our society, but because we think that these other aspects have an important place as well.